I bought in more on Bitcoin, and sure enough, it started rallying. Stocks did well as well over the last couple of days, and now we're at $41,000. So, what's next is basically my question. Are we at a ceiling now, or is this rally into risk assets going to continue?
Here you can see my chart of Bitcoin in front of you, but here was your dip when the invasion started, right? And what I had done that night is I put out limit orders because it occurred. I figured it could occur while I was sleeping. I wouldn't be able to react. So I put out a limit order to buy Bitcoin, Polkadot, Solana, even some more Cardano. And sure enough, they got hit, which was beautiful. And I was anticipating the same thing. You anticipate an overreaction, the panic. We've seen panic before, how it crushes assets, risk assets initially. And then what you see is them bouncing back. So that's exactly what I did. You did the right thing. In fact, the next morning, I had GLD, which is gold, the gold ETF, and I actually unloaded it on the gap up at the highs because I also expected it to come back down. And again, these are extremes. So you always want to go counter kind of trend or counter thought process. And that's exactly what you did there. And that was 100% correct. So go counter trend and you'll usually be right. And in terms of Bitcoin, what we're seeing here is a beautiful pop today. My feeling on it is that you've now got more sanctions with SWIFT being introduced or taken away from some of the Russian banks. This is becoming a longer drawn out conflict, more sanctions on Russian oligarchs. And that's going to make people more intrigued about, okay, well, does Russian oligarchs, do they start buying Bitcoin? Do they diversify out of rubles and out of currencies where they can actually move those Bitcoin assets to different locations and access them still? And then you also have the plight of the Ukrainians, where it's hard to get out of the country with suitcases full of money, but it's a lot easier to go somewhere else, access your Bitcoin as well. So I think you're seeing a little bit of that vibe of, okay, Bitcoin makes a lot of sense when there's geopolitical risk out there. My long-term thesis for Bitcoin is bullish. Yes, I do believe eventually we will see another leg down to 20,000. My very short term, as I mentioned, I bought some Bitcoin on that dip. So very short term, I think there could be a little bit more upside. But per the chart, I'm looking at an upside that could be capped around 42,000. That's my first kind of resistance. We're getting very, very close. And then if we get through 42,000, you have this upsloping trend line. You can see how it hit it right here. If we come back to it, it's around 47,000. That would be your next resistance. If it somehow can push through 47, then you're talking about 52,000 as being your next likely target. Now, again, this is all short-term movement. We're inside of a bigger bear cycle, in my opinion. So eventually we will see the Fed tightening more. And I think, by the way, that's part of it, right? So, as horrendous as the invasion is and people getting hurt, there's a chance for the equity markets to say, okay, the Federal Reserve may not raise 50 basis points in March because of the geopolitical turmoil. Maybe they're only going to raise 4 or 5 times in 2022 versus, I think, what JP Morgan said a couple of weeks ago, which was 8 or 9 times in 2022. So you've seen this little bit of a situation where tech stocks have actually been doing a little bit better since the invasion. And I think it has a lot to do with the chance that the Fed is not as aggressive on tightening.
We're at 41,000 today. You're saying that this short-term momentum is still likely to continue until at least 47,000?
Yeah, so 42 is going to be your first, small test. It's only a minor level of resistance here on the chart. So again, small test coming up at 42,000 may take a couple of days to try to push through it. But I do think that there is a decent chance that it's able to, and then may trade back up to that 47, this upsloping orange trend line here. I think what investors will have to understand is that everything we do here in technical analysis land is based on probabilities, right? So when you see a sharp move down like this, there's inevitably a period where you go sideways and chop for long periods of time. So you can see how you're starting to kind of do this pattern. And ultimately what you're forming is a bigger bearish pattern on the daily chart. It's called a bear flag or an in spirit of bear flag. And so the odds favor that at some point it breaks down. Now, it gives you a lot of opportunity to trade the range, which is what I've been doing. But inevitably, the midterm, I still think sub 20 or 20,000 is likely. And then once we get down there, once you see this kind of final flush out .com-ish type reckoning period, then I'll be starting to hodl myself and starting to accumulate more Bitcoin for the longer term.
At what point on the downside would it start to worry you and you would start to say to yourself, okay, now is time to actually start shorting a bit more?
Yeah, so and that's a great question, right? So this can be used for people that have longs like me. If it breaks this next level, I'll show you guys, then I would exit the longs that I have right now and say, okay, game up, game over. And basically it's this trend line, right? So you have a very defined line that you can watch. And the beauty of it is it's actually rising. So your stop is getting tighter and tighter as Bitcoin goes up, almost like a trailing stop in this situation. So if you were to get below this line on a daily closing basis, I would be very concerned that this range is now broken and price will then start trading down pretty aggressively.
Okay. All right, let's move on to stocks. So just to recap, actually, before we move on. So $47,000 is your first upside target, then 52. Got to break about 42,000 first, though, is what you're saying for Bitcoin. Okay. Now let's take a look at
resistance. Yeah, small resistance at 42, then big resistance at 47, then big resistance at 52. I don't expect it to get through 52.
People are asking me actually offline, is Gareth still holding on to his $20,000 Bitcoin outlook? I know we touch on this every time we interview, but so much happens in the world, so much develops very quickly. I have to ask you to recap and actually to provide an update if you do have an update on your views. So what's your downside target?
Yeah, downside is still 20 or sub 20,000. Nothing's changed in terms of that midterm price outlook. You still have a Federal Reserve that maybe is getting a little less hawkish in terms of how fast they're going to tighten, but I think that's going to keep inflation higher for longer, which means once, if we do get a settling down of the Russia-Ukraine situation, then the Fed is going to go back right towards tightening. That's going to be a risk-off situation, and Bitcoin and cryptos need to see that full flush out. So again, still ultimately looking for sub 20,000 for me to start to really accumulate for that longer term.
Bitcoin, you're looking at what, $47,000? Well, I'll let you do the talking. Bitcoin, stocks, gold. How do you feel? What are your targets? And we'll end it there.
Yeah, so again, just to rehash, look for a little bit of resistance around 42,000, give or take. If it can get through that, which I do think there's a chance maybe after a couple days, 47, and then if it gets through 47, 52. I don't think it gets through 52, may not even make it to 52. So just be alert that you have to really watch for when does the Fed start getting aggressive again. If things start calming down in Ukraine, then I do think that you have to be a little bit more conservative on your outlook on Bitcoin. Eventually, Bitcoin breaks the upsloping trend, which is around 33 to 34,000, eventually heading down probably in about 6 months to that 20,000 or sub 20,000 level.
How do you decide when to sell? I mean, you're looking at price targets. Let's assume it hits 52,000 Bitcoin. Yes, you start selling because you have a price target in mind. But generally, even before it hits 52,000, let's say it goes to 48, then you're deciding, should I wait to 52? Should I start selling out? What are the indicators you look at? Do you look at momentum trends? Do you look at volume? Here's my question. Do you wait until it goes back down and then you start selling when it on the weakness, or do you wait until the upside momentum starts to wane and then you think, okay, there's not enough juice to the upside, then I start selling? What do you do?
Yeah, so for me, what I do is I love to inch in and inch out, right? So when and last time I was on, you sold at right around 44,000, a portion of yours. I did the same thing. So I unloaded half my Bitcoin when it got to that 44,000 level. It touched 46 and then came back in. Then I bought in a little bit more. So I'm going to just kind of inch in and inch out. In terms of what I look for that tells me maybe a target's not going to get reached, it would be a reversal candle, some sort of little micro topping tail, something that's significant with some volume associated with it that would tell me, okay, there's an issue here. And then I would start to scale out and just take a smaller profit at that point. I also like the idea of having a break-even stop. Once you're in the money, you can always put that break-even or slightly in the money stop. And then if it flushes, you're okay. You still made some money or you took a flat out and you can live to fight another day.